If you own DaVinci Resolve Studio, you also own a license to Fusion Studio. It's an entirely underused, amazing standalone version of Fusion. And one of those reasons is because Fusion Studio includes unlimited render nodes, so you can use your whole network to render something out. And it's working on that last one that's on the iMac, and ding, fries are done. The shot is completed. So today, I'd like to come alongside and show you how I set up a free-ish render farm at my home office that combines an old 2015 iMac along with 3 Apple Silicon computers to render VFX shots faster. I'm gonna demo with just an off-the-shelf Blackmagic Cloud Pod using just a Samsung SSD as my shared network storage. We're keeping it simple. I'm going to use a project you can download from the Blackmagic website, and to finish it off, I'll also show you the Blackmagic Proxy to cloud workflow in case you have remote editors that need to roughen your shots. There are 5 things that you need to be aware about if you want to use the free render farm method I'm showing today. The first is a paid version of either Resolve Studio or Fusion Studio. And like I said, if you have Resolve Studio, you can download Fusion Studio, put it on the same machine, it will take that same license. You don't have to pay for anything extra. Second thing is you need multiple computers on the same network. So ideally, they're going to be wired in with Ethernet to your network switch. It can work over Wi-Fi. It's just Ethernet's going to be much faster, more stable. The third thing is going to be shared storage. So like I said, I'm going to be using the Cloud Pod today, but you can also use, the Mac has a sharing setting that you can share out volumes and folders on that as well. I've got tutorials on that. Or ideally, you probably use something bigger like a Synology NAS is what my preference is, but you can do this on any kind of network storage as long as you can see the same folders on every machine. The fourth thing you're gonna need is the standalone Fusion Studio installer. And you'll notice once you download it and open it up, there's actually 2 installer files in there. One is for Fusion Studio, which is the application that's like the Fusion page in Resolve. And then the other one is going to be the Fusion render node. And then the 5th thing I gotta let you know is you need to be open to working with image sequence files, EXRs, DPX, that sort of thing, instead of your traditional QuickTimes that you might be used to rendering out. Now, the reason why is because the way network rendering works is each computer gets assigned a specific frame to render out. So like my M2 Max might be rendering out frame 1, the M4 Mini back there might be rendering out frame 2, the laptop frame 3, and so on. Go to blackmagicdesign.com/support. And then once you're on this page, I like to just scroll down here to where it says DaVinci Resolve and Fusion Software. Click that button. And once you click it, it highlights blue, but you'll scroll down here and you'll see this will pull the latest versions of all these, which is generally what you want to be working with. It shows Resolve first, and then they compile the the Fusion Studio version right below here as well. So you're going to click and download it for your operating system. I'm just going to show on Mac today. That's because that's what I know. I'm going to hop over to my M4 Mini computer. I like to use Jump Desktop to get there. And this is what the installer is going to look like. If you double click the disk image, this is what I'm talking about. You're going to have a Fusion Studio installer, and then you also have the Fusion render node. So the idea here is my M4 Mini is going to get the render node installed, and then my main M2 Max machine is going to get the main Fusion Studio because that's my main computer. That's the one I'm working with right now. So I'm going to double click the render node to show you how this one gets installed. It's just like any other install. There's nothing really special. Click open, and it's going to say, do you want to allow network access or access to a network volume? Absolutely. And the first time you actually run this, you're going to get a permissions thing on the Mac to make sure you can allow it. You're only have to do this the first time that you render a render over the network. So we're going to just say, click to continue, agree, of course, and then enter our super secret password for the computer as the admin. And once this is done, this is going to give you a little tiny application that runs in the background on that computer, just so that Fusion Studio, when it looks for computers on the network, it can use that CPU for rendering certain frames. All right, so that is installed. I am going to, you can see we got this background items added, and we can check these in this area here. And I even add this here to my Open at Login screen here as well. So I find this to be nice so that it's always just, it's up and running, nice and silent in the background, along with all my other crap that I have to have going on. So I'm going to go ahead and close this out. We can unmount the disk image from the installer there. And we don't see it up here in the menu bar yet because it's not actually running quite yet. I'm going to open up the Fusion render node by just command space bar is how I like to do that. And you'll see we've got this little render status, and it's allowing network renders. So that's the main thing. You need to say allow network renders. And then we also need to make sure we mount the volume on all the network render machines that is has access to the saver location that we're going to be setting up, as well as the read location of the project file. I keep those basically in the same job folder. So I'm going to be using this cloud pod folder right here. I've got a BMD spaceship project already set up inside this VFX folder. I ran a bunch of test renders to see how fast I could get this going. And inside here, you'll see there's a spaceship version 1, 2 comp files. Those are the ones we are going to download from the website, which I'll show you where you get that from next. So back over on the website, to get the project files that we're going to work with, you want to go to blackmagicdesign.com and then Products Fusion. So don't go to the DaVinci Resolve /Fusion. This is how you'll be able to find this cool old spaceship project file we're going to work with. Scroll down and you'll see after what's new in Fusion, there's a section that says download demonstration project files. This is where you'll download the comp file with all the stuff that needs to be used to build this. Essentially what it's going to be is this cool little spaceship over here. That's flying through space like some sort of Star Wars deal. And it has, what does it have in it? It has geometry and everything that needs to skin that thing. If you look in the assets folder, there's an OBJ file and some JPEGs with UVs that are getting placed on top of it. In interest of saving a little time, I'm gonna assume you can install render nodes on all the other computers you have available. This one here is a 2015 iMac. It's my son's. It's got the render node open and with this Fusion render node running. I've got the same thing on this M1 Max. The main thing to know is you need the render node just turned on and running, and say allow network renders, and then also make sure the network volume is mounted on those as well. Let's get back over to Fusion Studio on my main machine. I'll show you how to render this out, make use of it all. So this is the comp file. This is the spaceship comp that they give you on their page as their sort of demo. And down in the lower right at the very bottom, you'll find a saver node. And so what a saver node is, this one that has .dpx at the end, what a saver node is essentially basically your media out when you're in Resolve Studio. It's like in Resolve, it's just rendering back to the timeline. But in Fusion Studio, you actually have to bake this out to some, an image sequence file, essentially is what we're going to be doing here. The cool thing about Fusion Studio is when you render stuff out in the file name, you can use this little shorthand over here where it says comp with a colon to render relative to where the comp file is stored. And so what that means in proper terms is in Finder, you see I have this folder here that has shots in it. There's the comp file. I've got the one that's called version 02 loaded right now. If I want to render this out, I can use that comp shorthand to say, oh, I want to render this into that same folder that the comp file is, where the script is located, where all the project information is. But actually, there's even more you can do with that with just a little bit of extra knowledge that I want to show you. And that's because I want to render out to this renders folder that's outside of the shots folder, outside of the location of the comp directory, and that's just using a couple of periods. So when you set your renders up, they're separate from the shots. And I think that's a really good way to work. So we're looking over here, file name, and I'm going to turn off this spotlight thing because it's kind of annoying me. But what we're looking at is you could just say browse and point this to a specific location on your hard drive. You could choose desktop and then just make it into a folder and it writes all the files out. But instead, what I like to do is say comp right here. You see COMP with a colon. And then on a Mac, we use forward slashes. I think on Windows, you use backslashes for some reason. But the idea here is, actually, let me zoom this in. I have two periods there. The first period, the first dot there, is saying I want to write this to the location of where it's at currently. But if you put a second one, it's taking up a directory. So it's taking up a folder level. So if we look back over here at the Finder, if I had just the dot, it would be looking directly into this shots folder. But the second dot over here is saying, I want to look one folder that's higher up. And in our case here, it would be this 6 VFX folder or directory. So if I double click there, then it's saying, okay, do your magic. So a forward slash here is going to say renders, which is going to create a folder that's called renders. And that's this create folder during render is going to help us out a lot too. So you see it's going to automatically create this folder. Watch, let's go ahead and trash that right now. And I'll show you how this works. I have a lot of renders that I had practiced on earlier to see how fast I could get this thing going, which I'll tell you at the end of the video, whether I use one computer, 2, 3, or all 4 that I have available. Now, one thing I will say about when you render image sequences is because it is actually creating so many different files, sometimes when you're uploading and downloading to cloud services, I've noticed it can take a little bit longer because it has to manage each frame separately. But at the same time, we can write these out really fast because we can use different frames being assigned to different computers. Now that that's cleaned out, we just have shots here. Nothing's been rendered. Go back over to our file name. I've got comp : / renders, which is a folder it's going to create on render. And then I'm going to create a folder here called spaceship version 30. Actually, let's just version this up because I already did that earlier. Version 31 is going to be a folder because that one is actually sitting inside of 2 forward slashes there as well. And then I will come over here again. If I get control of my mouse again, I come over here again, and I want to make sure that my actual sequence file is matching the folder file. So this is version 31 for the folder, and then this one here is going to be the name of the image sequences, so the image files that it's going to make out, or it's going to render out. And then I do want to put an underscore at the end, so that gives me just a little separator before it renders out all the frame numbers as this happens. So how do we send this out to network computers to render? Well, in Fusion Studio, go up here to File, Render Manager. Command M is your shortcut to get there. And then once you open this up, this is what's going to actually assign frames to different computers. This is like your traffic cop. And on the right side over here, you've got the ability to scan the network for render nodes, like Fusion render nodes, right? I'm going to right click over here and say Scan for render nodes. And it's going through and it has scanned for render nodes. Now it has found 5 render nodes in my system, but I actually only have 4 computers. And the reason why is this one right here, the CVT M2 Max Studio. That's the computer I'm working on within Fusion Studio, but it's also the local host. And sometimes I've noticed that it's not the best idea to double assign a computer. So I'm just gonna delete this M2 Max Studio from the list here so that each computer is kind of getting equal work, I guess is how I would say it. Now that that is all set up, those are all idle and ready to go to work. So I can close this out. Again, the command to open this and close it will be Command M. So Command M opens and closes so you can see what the render manager is doing. And to render the shot out, Fusion Studio has a render button right down here. So instead of render all savers, which is what you have to do in Resolve Studio if you're rendering a sequence out, just click this render button down here, and when this opens up, check the box that says Use Network. It's not going to be checked the first time you do this. But the other thing you'll want to pay attention to here that's important is your configurations for Final or Preview is another one that's built in. Preview is going to be your proxy. That's going to get this cooking much faster for the tutorial, so I'm going to click Preview, but Final would just be everything, full blown. And then over here, we've got network groups to render with. You can get really granular with this, but we're going to leave this with render nodes set to all. We'll say start render, and it's saying there's nothing else ahead of this in the render queue. Of course not. This is a home studio. I'll click OK, and I'll open up that render manager again now with Command M, and we'll see these computers are all going to work with each computer is getting assigned a different frame right here. And it's just cranking through these. You can see it's got 325 frames remaining. And as I say that, it's already done 10 frames. Down the list here, you'll see the different computers that are getting assigned to them and when they're completed as well. It's super cool. And this is included for free. You can add this to as many computers as you want with that one single license of Fusion or Resolve Studio. If you look at those other computers, like let's look at the M1 Max, you can see on the render node itself and go to render status. It actually tells you, oh, this one right here is currently rendering frame 112. If I go over here to the M4 Mini, I go to render status, you can see this one right now is working on frame 154, 157. And this is one of the reasons I really think these M4 Minis are so cool, because the processors are so fast and the cost per computer is not bad at all. That machine that I'm running right now, this M4 Mini, is a baseline and is less than like $600. And it's working on frames right now for my Fusion Studio project. You can even render entire sequences from another machine using the remote rendering features that are in Resolve that I talk about in the tutorial linked above. Okay, this is the iMac, and let's see if this one's getting frames. I'm working hard. Yep, that one's working on frame 241 at the moment. Let's go back and look at Fusion. You can see this is the render manager queue, just being a traffic cop, handing this frame to this machine, this frame to this machine. So I'll show you in the Finder what's happening over here. So it has created that renders folder that was based off of the Saber. So the Saber created the renders folder relative to the location of the comp file. And if I open up the spaceship file, here is our long list of images that the image sequence is rendering out, starting with frame 1, and it just keeps growing and growing and growing. So you'll see, there goes my file size going up and up and up. So while this is rendering out, I want to explain to you how much faster this actually is to get this shot rendered out when I use all my computers versus just the one. So using all computers, I was generally able to render this sequence on preview in about 2 minutes and 31 seconds. Now, I've got OBS running right now and some other stuff, so that's why it was a little bit slower. With 3 computers, I was able to do it in 2 minutes and 51 seconds. With 2 computers, it was 3 minutes and 48 seconds. And then just using my one single M2 Max computer without using the others, it was 5:57. So 5:57 for the one computer, or 2:31. We're talking like twice as fast, more than twice as fast, to make use of all these different CPUs that maybe you have available. And maybe this will allow you to render that shot with motion blur that you didn't think you could right before that client presentation. To create a new comp in Fusion, super easy. Command N, new comp, it's ready to go. How do we get footage in here, and how do we make this timeline ruler down here the exact duration? Let me grab a clip. Any old clip will work, actually. Why don't I grab a clip of me talking to the camera? So this one right here is 1,559 frames long. I've got a LUT on there. I'm going to disable that. But my timeline down here is not 1559. All you have to do is hold down Shift and drag this to the toolbar. And look at that. That's my Fusion Studio trick for anytime you work on a new clip. Hold Shift, drag the loader node down to the toolbar, and now you've trimmed that so that the comp is the duration of the footage that you're working with. Now let's take a quick look on how you load the image sequence into Resolve and then create proxies that can be synced over Blackmagic Cloud. Well, the way I like to do this is the Cloud tab in DaVinci Resolve 19. Create a new project within a Cloud project library. And when you do that, you get this window here that asks for some information. I'm going to call this one Cloud Fusion Demo. And then it's going to have a location here that you need to choose. I have this set to an external hard drive, another Samsung drive, but essentially what this is asking is when other people upload files, it needs to download that file to your machine. Where is it going to store that? So that's what that's asking right there. Multiple users. Of course, we want multiple users. The thing to know about this here is if you ever need to delete the project, you need to change it back to single user before you can actually delete the project. And you actually have to delete the project before you can delete it from their website. That's another thing that you have to know. But again, this is actually really simple. For synchronized storage of Blackmagic Cloud, we're going to sync proxies only. And I'm going to say don't allow camera access. This would be if you had a Pixis or a Blackmagic phone app that's loading files into your project live. That's for another day. I'm going to hit create, and it's going to create a new project file in the cloud. And before I even bring anything into here, I do want to point you down here in the lower right, this little cloud button. this brings us to all our settings. If you hit the gear cog, it jumps us straight to the project settings for this, which is going to tell me a few things. One, it's going to tell me, are we going to be syncing proxies or proxies and originals? The other thing it's going to do is, do we want this to happen automatically? I do want this to happen automatically so that I don't have to think about it. The less I have to think about is nice. And then you can also choose the codec for what's being used. I've done lots of tests on this. I really like the H.265 for any sort of cloud sharing projects. They're small and they look nice. So this folder here contains all the DPX sequence of files. It's 2.51 gigabytes. To load this into Resolve, you can see it's a bunch of DPX files. I just load it by just dragging the folder into there. That's it. Just drag the folder. You'll automatically load this into there. And as it's going into here, it's going to automatically try to generate a proxy file for it. So we can see right now it's generating a new proxy because I had just run a test on this before with an old proxy. It's just finished creating it. And we don't really see a change over here yet, but it has synced with the cloud. The reason we don't see a change to the file is because it's not using it yet. So to actually use the proxy in the project, you just click this button at the top of the timeline viewer and change this to say prefer proxies. And once you do that, you get this handy dandy purple PXY badge on it. That lets you know that you're actually using and looking at the proxy file instead. And then when you want to go online it and go to finish it later on, just change this again to prefer camera originals or disable proxies, and if you have it attached, you'll see the final render file right there. But anybody anywhere in the world now can open this up and take a look at that proxy file. So if I look in here, you can see this is 3 megabytes versus the whole shot was, what did I say it was? 2.51 gigabytes. So this is going to save you a lot on cloud storage. So you can see this is a great workflow if you want to use the most power that you have locally and still be able to upload a tiny proxy to anybody else anywhere in the world. Hey, my name is Chadwick. I'm a DaVinci Resolve master trainer based here in New York, but I'd love to teach you wherever you're at. And because there's so much more to learn, I'll see you in the next video.